everyone, and welcome to SLG Chartership webinar. I'm very pleased to see you all. This session will be on reflective writing, and Sarah Pavey will be taking us through this session. I've been to Sarah's sessions on reflective writing before. They are excellent, and you will understand exactly what is needed by the end of it. Sarah said you'll need pencil and paper to jot things down. So if you haven't got one yet, I've just run off and get one, because Sarah's sessions are usually quickfire and you really do need to grab everything. But don't worry, the recording will be available afterwards for everyone who's been here today. And obviously we will put it in a secure area to share after the event. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Sarah.
Okay, well, first of all, big thank you to Barbara, who I think really does a wonderful session on the PKSB and making it clear. And I think the main thing is, when we're doing our portfolios, to remember is that, you know, it's the PKSB really is a tool for you. It's keeping that in mind. It's just a way that you can use it to define your own thoughts, to make choices about what evidence you're going to submit, and so on. And so what I'm going to be doing in this session is looking at the other side of it, the bits that you really are presenting to other people, because this is what the person that's going to be assessing your portfolio will be looking at. And they're going to be looking at in a way that abides to the 3 assessment criteria that CILIP put forward for all different types of their professional qualifications, whether that's the certification, whether it's chartership or whether it's fellowship. It's all the same, and we need to bear those in mind as we're going through it. So first of all, let's have a little look. And this isn't working. That's a good start, isn't it? There we are. I just want to have a look at some objectives, first of all, for this session. So we're going to look at the skills that you need when you're actually writing up your portfolio. What is it that the assessor is going to be looking for, and how can you maximise your chances of getting through it first time? I think, you know, going through CILIP professional qualifications, it's a bit like when you took your driving test, if you've been in that situation, because, you know, you can't always expect to get through first time. Sometimes you have to go away and do a bit more work. And the idea of a driving test is that the person that you're driving around should feel comfortable. And the idea of a professional qualification in CILIP really is about, do people feel comfortable with you being in charge and saying, look, I'm a professional librarian and I can do these things. So that's what the assessor's really trying to get at, is, do you really understand the purpose of your job? And one of the things that goes along with that, really, what we're going to delve into a bit more, is making sure that you're not just writing up narrative accounts of what you've done in the past and why you think you should have gone from CILIP, but actually looking at reflecting on the process of your journey and what you personally gained from it, as well as your community and the wider profession. So we're going to look, and a bit later on in a very practical way, about the techniques that you might need to push you into writing reflectively, and therefore putting together a good portfolio presentation that's going to get you the points in order to pass the qualification. And now this is a common scenario. I don't know whether any of you have already had a go at trying to get through your chartership, your professional qualifications, but I've certainly had mentees where they've been rejected, and I've worked with them, and it's been really hard getting the work right, and a few battles because people haven't understood what's meant really by reflective writing. And this is the trouble. You know, you might have worked really, really, really hard. Maybe you're setting up a new library from scratch. Maybe you've completely recatalogued all your resources and so on. And you write up what you did, and all the students that come into the library are saying, oh, that was absolutely fantastic. You know, we can really enthused about using the library again now because of what you did. And you think, why haven't I passed this qualification? Why have I failed? And it's quite often because we've just literally written up what we did. We haven't explained why. And that's what a professional qualification really is about. So let's have a look and see what we can do. One of the things that we need to bear in mind is that there's a big difference between the academic qualification and a professional qualification. When you look at academic qualifications, if you've passed GCSEs, A-levels, perhaps you've done a degree, perhaps you've done a vocational qualification, it doesn't matter what. The examiner is looking to see whether you have retained the knowledge that they delivered to you over the course of the qualification that you took. Have you taken on board the syllabus? Do you know what that contained? And can you understand the concepts that were within it? And if you can, and you can demonstrate that on paper, then they will award you with that particular qualification that you're working towards. And that's very much an academic qualification. So some of you might say, oh, I've done the master's degree in library and information science, or I've done maybe an MA in education, or I've done something, or maybe just a first degree in library and information. You could have done anything like that. And you might think, oh, well, that makes me a good librarian. That means that, I should be respected for what I can do. And the danger is that you approach the portfolio for the professional qualifications in the same way. And we can't. It's a different qualification, and it's looking at a different kind of progress in your career. Okay, so what we're looking at really is this professional idea. And with a professional qualification, it's much more about the journey that we are taking, and it's about how we can get what's invisible, what's going on inside our heads while we undertake that journey. How do we get that down onto paper? So it's about thinking about why you're doing what you're doing. Oh, I've lost them. I'm struggling here with it. Sorry, this is just, it's not actually doing what I want it to do, but never mind. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're looking really at what's going on inside your head. So in other words, what are you thinking about? Because a professional qualification is very much about documenting the journey. And we need to keep that in mind. It's a little bit like if you were doing, say, an A-level, you would be asked to just regurgitate what you've learnt, more or less. But if you were doing something like an EPQ or an IB qualification, International Baccalaureate qualification, they would be looking at how you got to that end point. So academic is about end point, professional is about process. And it's always a good idea to keep that in mind as we're going on. So one of the other things that we need to think about is that CILIP put forward 3 criteria that they're going to assess your portfolio on. And we need to make sure that we meet those. And they come into the 3 areas are, first of all, what did taking this journey do for you personally? Now, this kind of ties in to a certain extent with what Barbara was saying about the PKSB. Because when you're putting together that PKSB, you start off by giving it a rating. And ideally, you want to pick areas where you want to improve. So you give yourself a low rating, so in order that while you start your journey, your CPD, your investigation into it, producing your evidence, you can then show how that level changes and becomes better as you start undertaking the activity. So this is the area of how it improved for you personally. And that's where we can sort of look at that and you can reflect on, well, how did I get there? How did I make that change from being at a very basic level to a more informed level? The second area that they're going to look at is they're going to say, yeah, but it's okay, you've got something out of it. But what has your community got out of it? So if we take the example of cataloguing again, if you did reorganise your cataloguing, maybe you took your fiction, you decided, I'm going to put it all into genre now. So if you did that, you could then look and say, well, how did that impact on the service I'm providing? And that's where we can sort of get some ideas from teachers and students to say how it actually affected their way in which they could choose their fiction reading from now on. But what you would do in your portfolio is to reflect on that, not just to say, oh, the loans went up, but you would say, well, why did they? What happened? What made that difference happen? And that's what we're trying to capture and put down in our reflective writing. And the third level that they're looking at is they're going to say, well, okay, how did what you did get impacted by librarians in other sectors, or maybe something that you read in a professional journal? And how do you think what you've done contributes to the whole as well? How does it change other people's perceptions about how they might go about a similar task or something that's related? So those are the three areas. What's in it for me? And how did I develop as a result of that? How did I affect my community, and how did I help my community, and what was the journey towards that? And thirdly, what did I use from my friends in other sectors or read about in other sectors, and how does what I do contribute to the whole? It's all about standing on the shoulders of giants, and it's all about how we can contribute to that overall research base. So if we start thinking about it in those terms, then it becomes a professional qualification, because we are embracing the whole profession. We're showing the community why being a professional matters, and we're also feeding into the wider professional pool. So when we're looking at writing style, it is very, very, very easy to slip into this trap of narrative writing. I did this, then next I did this. Now, let's take something like induction. You might write narratively, and you might say, I got asked by the deputy head to run an induction session on the library for students. 30 students turned up for the induction session. I got them all to create a map of where everything was in the library, and they all did that really successfully, and I felt it was a good session. That's and we managed to do the whole of the school within 2 weeks, or something like that. That's very narrative, and it's just saying what you did, and I'm sure what you did was really good and everything else, but the person reading it has got no idea from that. All they know is what you did. They don't really understand how you got there, how you devised that lesson, and what the outcome of it was, and what impact it had on you, on your community, and on the wider profession. How could other people use it? Well, it'd be very difficult if they didn't know what the purpose was. So reflective writing is all about looking back and saying, well, how well did I do? And why was it successful? And what could I do in the future maybe to make it even better? So taking the idea of the induction course again, why did the deputy head ask us to do an induction course? What was the purpose of that? How did I start going about it? Did I go and look and see what other librarians have been doing for induction? And how did I decide on which one I was going to use, which style I was going to adopt? And what about the actual running of it? I mean, did I have to ask the teacher if there were any things that I needed to know about the class before they came in? Was all that part of it? And how do I know that by creating this map, they were going to know more about the library? How did I test that? How did I find out that information? Did I just ask pupils randomly afterwards? Did I remember to put in some kind of plenary at the end of the session? So all of that, and then looking back on it again, well, would I have chosen the same exercise? Would I have done something differently? All of that is to do with your reflective writing. And that's the bit that we need to download into our write-ups. And it's really important that we do that, because otherwise, if we just present this narrative, we ain't going to pass that qualification. So, looking at this, The reflective writing process, there are basically 3 stages in it that we need to keep in mind. The first one is, keep pressing enter and I've got to press this little thing down here. The first one is looking back in context. So how did this piece of evidence come about? Why did we decide to do it? And the second aspect of reflective writing is going to be looking critically at what you've done and thinking, was that the best way? Or why did you decide to do it that way? What influenced you in doing it that way? And the third bit is looking back and thinking, well, if I was to do this again, or I needed to apply this to something else that I'm doing, what would the criteria be for that? So if we can put all of this information into our evidence, then we are writing reflectively. So how does that work in practice? So let's have a look at the contents, and then we're going to have a bit of a play around with it as well. So let's first of all start by looking back in the context. And this would be looking at your PKSB and thinking, well, what areas of my PKSB am I going to concentrate on? And while you're doing that, somebody said they picked 30 different areas of the PKSB. Well, that's laudable, but, reflecting on all of those and thinking, well, why do I think that's suitable? Why do I want to do that? What am I going to gain from that? What is my community going to gain from that? And how am I going to maybe undertake some CPD, or how am I going to interrogate other parts of the profession in order to feed in their ideas into that? So if we start thinking in those terms, even when we're making our PKSB choices, it starts beginning that reflective writing process and making it easier. So it's jotting down those ideas while we think about that. So the next thing is what about, why you're going to do it? So it's not just about what influenced you maybe, but what is your current situation on that task? What do you think about induction, for example? What's the purpose of it? What's it there for? And by doing this and putting this down at the beginning and jotting down your notes on that, you can then, when we get to the hindsight bit, look back and see, as Barbara said, maybe as you start the journey, you might think you're quite good at it, but then you suddenly realise there's a whole load of stuff you didn't know about before. So again, keeping a record of that helps us with our reflective writing. The next thing is that what was it that determined that opinion that you've got? So was it something you'd heard somebody else say, or was it something you'd read, or was it something you were just told by a member of staff that you had to do? Was it senior leadership? Did they actually impose that restriction on you? So this is all that determining the context of what you're going to think about in this part of the reflection. So, the next thing is that it's that tying it in to the criteria and the evidence that you've also got in your portfolio. So submitting a library development plan, submitting the wider aims of the school, looking at their mission statement that's probably on their website. How does the tasks that you have decided on the PKSB and the evidence you're going to collect, how do they actually tie into that? And that again forms part of the reflective writing. It's about your choice, why you decided on it, but it's also got to show that it's got purpose. It can't just be because I wanted to do it. It's got to actually show purpose. And if you can do that, then and you can show that by doing this, you either grow personally and hopefully your community benefits and the wider community benefits, then it's going to be a more successful piece of evidence. So this reflection helps us to choose those sections within the PKSB as well. Okay, so hopefully we can now look at critical analysis. So this is the kind of the meat in the middle of it. And this is where we start thinking about using that reflective writing. So what we're not doing is we are, as far as possible, we are not asking these sorts of questions: what, when, who, where, and so on. Because if we do that, we are just using descriptions of what we're doing. Now, you might say, well, that's all very well having reflective writing, but somebody's got to know a little bit about the context of it. Well, the good thing is that when we write reflectively, if we're clever and we start using this sort of terminology, which is why, how, what next, and our thoughts and feelings about it, this is what we would call reflective writing. And the good thing about this is that even though it's asking these questions, we can frame them so that we are giving context to it. So the why, if we're saying why we've chosen this piece of evidence, it might be by explaining why we're saying, well, we're holding an induction because we know that the senior leadership felt that the library wasn't being used effectively. So when you say how, you can then say, so what we decided to do was to bring in a lesson whereby we could do this. Well, that's setting some of this criteria of the what, when, who, and where, but it's doing it within a reflective framework. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to not make it just narrative and just a timeline, but we're actually looking at the reasons, the whys, and the wherefores here. And this bit, our thoughts and feelings, is really important, because you might say, well, I started off doing this and then halfway through I realized that wasn't working, so I thought I'd do this instead. Because it's like looking at workings out in your margin, if you were doing a maths problem, for example, it's along those lines. It's giving the examiner or the assessor clues as to how you arrived at the journey you undertook. How did you get to your destination? That's what they're looking at. They're not looking at just a narrative, but they're looking at all the obstacles and things that you met along the way, and how did you deal with them? Because when you think about it, academic, which is this, is just saying, how much have you learnt and can you remember it? But professional is looking at, how did you manage to cope with the ups and downs of that journey? What influenced you as you went on? What pushed you forward? What held you back? It's all of those things that are reflective. And that is what they're doing. Going back to the driving test analogy, yep, you can do the theory test. You know all the theory and everything. But can you actually get in the car and drive it and make your passengers feel safe? And that's what they're trying to examine is, can you cope with everyday life as a librarian? And can you promote it for yourself personally, for your community, and also for the wider profession as well? Can they learn something from it? So really important that we keep that in mind. And the third bit is really about hindsight. And this is where you do the most amazing project. You have the most fantastic evidence, everything else. You think everything's going brilliantly. And then you read something and you think, oh, no, if only I had done that, it would be so much better. And now it's too late because I've got all my evidence ready. And we've all hit that moment. And we don't need to worry, because this is a professional qualification. It's about, what have I learnt? How did I feel about it? And how am I going to apply my knowledge in the future? And this is really what we're trying to do, because we want to be able to take our experiences from that journey and say, oh, I could use this for something else that will come up in the future that I don't even know about yet. And so it's about learning how to cope with those instances, but making that journey explicit to the examiner. So does that sort of make sense so far? Does that would be okay? You can put thumbs up if you like on the reactions. Or type in chat. Another thing, before we get on to the practical side of it, another thing is that it's about you, your portfolio. Yeah? It's not about a librarian. It's about you. So if it's about you, we've got to write about me, not about somebody else. And so the kinds of language that you use in your write-up have to reflect that. So this was taken from a really good Cambridge LibGuides on reflective practice and reflective learning. We can't really delve into reflective practice today, but that's kind of what you do after you've done the reflective writing. But here, when we're writing up, the most important thing I felt, I would even put I felt was in there. At the time, I felt this, this went wrong, but it was likely due to, or this went right because, and so on. And that reflection, after thinking about it, and what did I learn? What do I need to know more about? And it's that kind of, yes, that light bulb moment. Oh, later, I've realised I should have done that instead. And this was because, and you can put all of these phrases in to make it seem like a story for the reader. Now, we all know as school librarians that we like a story. And if we can storify our journey through the evidence, it makes it much more readable, much easier and kinder on the eye for the person that's reflecting, that's assessing it. And they can look and immediately see whether you have made a difference personally or to your community or to the wider profession. And they do this by looking at your little reflective introduction and then looking at the evidence that supports that shows, well, I'm saying this, but look, hang on, here's the evidence that backs that up. And that's really what your evidence is about. But we've got to make what's going on in your head explicit for the person who's marking your work. Now, one of the easiest things, when I used to explain to some of my students who were doing international baccalaureate extended essays, when I wanted them to actually write down reflectively for their essays, I often was working with students who hadn't got a very good command of English. English was their second language. And I used to say to them, look, we all get that awful moment of staring at the blank page. And I think that, it would be really, really good if we could get down some of those creative ideas you've got, but you don't want that hampered by this awful thing of, I know from writing, it's dire. You get to the point where you get really excited and then you suddenly think, oh no, I've got to actually get it down on paper. And it's that bit that gets really boring. And then you write it quickly because you can't be bothered to write in all the interesting things you thought of. So a really good way to do this is to actually record yourself speaking about your evidence on the phone or videoing yourself and doing that and just letting your thoughts flow. And we're going to do some examples of this in practice in a minute as well. So all of that side of it, really important to get down our creativity. And so let's do some creativity. Should we do that for a start? Okay. Interaction time. Right. We will show how reflective writing works in practice. First of all, I'd like you all to just choose a shape. Choose a shape, any shape you like that's there on the screen. We've got a cylinder, we've got a heart, and we've got a hexagon. So just choose one of those on there. And then what I'd like you to do is to either jot down for yourself if you're shy, or unmute and say, or write in chat, what influenced you to choose that shape? So in chat or unmute and shout out, whatever you like. I can't see who's unmuted and who hasn't, so I'll leave that to.
I'll speak if you want, because I just made a mistake. So I chose the heart first, and then I changed my mind and I chose the hexagon because I was like, oh, the heart's a bit twee. So that was my
okay, right, good. And why did you go for the hexagon?
I like the symmetry of it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to say I've chosen the hexagon, and it's because it's symmetrical. It appeals to my organised brain.
Organisation, yeah. Lots of things. Actually, a good mixture here coming through in chat. Heart share, stirring my emotions, touchy feely. Yes, hexagons, lots of sides. Oh, heart looks rounded and comforting, and so on. Chose the thing. Okay, that's poor old cylinder's not getting much. Old cylinder, there we go, 3D, like 3D shapes and so on. So, this is how we can apply when we're looking at our PKSB. and we're deciding what we're going to use for the PKSB. And it's about what influences you on it, because all these things are coming out just for these shapes, aren't they? Reasons for it. Yeah, cylinders are receptacle. It contains things. Oh, I like that. Yes, yeah. So, it really kind of makes you think about, why did I choose it? So using this little exercise, when you're going through the PKSB and you're choosing those sections, this is the sort of thing to think, why am I choosing this? What is it? Is it because I know that I've got people that can support me on this? Maybe I know that I can go and do some CPD on it. Maybe I like it. It's just an area that I really feel I could get my teeth into because it's going to involve the students and I want to involve students. Or maybe it's something very academic and I kind of veer to that. So we all choose things for a reason. And just doing a simple thing here with a shape can make us reflect really on, why we're choosing that. So think about your evidence. Think about in this way, what is it that spurred you towards that? And write down the notes about it, the reasons why, because that then helps us when we're doing our reflective writing. We can look back and see why we chose them. The next thing I'm going to get you to do is to actually draw your shape, or you can draw it in your mind if you've forgotten to bring pen and paper, or you can draw it on the screen if you've got one, and just transform it into something else. So just give that a go. I'm going to have a drink of coffee while that's going on. Give everybody a few minutes to do something on that. Oh, does that mean participants couldn't see the application before? Just got a notice up that says.
No, it's absolutely fine, Sarah.
I'm getting paranoid now about this. Okay. Right, so what I'd like you to do, having sort of transformed on here, is to think now about what influenced you in terms of what you turned your shape into. What can it be used for now that perhaps it couldn't do previously? Does it take on a new meaning? And how easy was it for you to transform it? Did you come up against any barriers? Maybe I stopped the creative process too quickly. And how did you feel while you were completing it? So would somebody like to, either you can put thoughts on any one of those aspects in chat if you want, or all of them, or you can unmute and contribute. The more contributions we have, the better.
I'm just going to say I drew the shape and then I looked at it. I didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So I basically filled it in with smaller and smaller hexagons and a little dot in the middle.
Lovely. And what are you going to use that for now?
A mandala to fill it in.
Yeah.
A colouring show.
Colouring thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did have a sort of like a blank moment, like you say, you stare at the paper.
Yeah. I like the mouse running away. The heart was turned into a mouse that could run away. Yeah. I'm guessing the eyes were down at the pointy bit. Yeah. Snowman. Oh, somebody. Perhaps you're in the snowy land, and we've got Alice in Wonderland coming up. Change kite. Things. So yeah. So what were your feelings while you were doing it? What were your feelings on it? How did it feel doing that exercise? Was it easy? Was it hard? Were there difficulties along the way? Barbara's just shared with us about her blank moment. Wish I was better at drawing. Yes, yeah. Doing something more formal. Yes. Some people liked it, felt it was free. Yeah. Freedom and control. Yeah. So, some people like having that, taking away the barriers and being able to think freely. Other people prefer to have structure, and that's all part of our individual makeups, and there's no right and there's no wrong. And one of the things when it comes to your evidence is that, there is no right and wrong. It's what you do with it that matters. And this is a really important part of reflective writing, is that we write about our personal experiences. And this is what CILIP assessors are looking for. So again, if we go back to something like the induction session, it's sort of, what influenced you? Well, maybe my friend used an induction session and I said, oh, could you lend me your notes and do it? And then I used her idea, but actually it wasn't something I felt really comfortable with, because it wasn't really me. It was her idea, not mine. And so then I adapted it, and I thought, how would I make it easier for me? And it's those sort of moments on the journey that the assessor's looking for. And because they want to know how good a professional librarian you're going to be and how much influence you can have over others. But what did you learn from the journey? So, a lot of people have said, it was the drawing ability that held you back. Well, then, if that's the case, then think about your evidence. If there's something on that evidence that's holding you back, is this the best activity to do, or should you do something else? Or maybe you compromise and you say, well, yes, part of my journey is learning to deal with that difficulty. And I want the assessor to know about that, how difficult I found it, because that also feeds into my evidence. If I wasn't comfortable, if I stepped out of that zone that I feel best in, how did that actually affect me? And did that then affect the outcome of what I was trying to do? If I had been somebody who got a fine arts degree, would I have made a better, attempt at this? Or is it the fact that I changed it into something else that could be used by somebody in a different way that was the most important thing? And maybe it doesn't, drawing ability isn't relevant to this piece of evidence. So it's all that criticism, all that thinking about it that frames how we analyse the evidence that we choose to use. So this is a really important part of the learning process on here. And the third bit is, remember, the third step in it is going to be that hindsight. And if we look back on this, and some people have already leapt to this already, but if you had to choose again, would you have made a different choice of shape? So let's hear people on that one. Do you want to put into chat on that, or unmute and say if you would have made a different choice? And not just if you would have made a different choice, but reflecting on that and saying,
I probably would have chosen the cylinder, because I think it leads to more things you can make.
Right. So again, with your evidence, you'd have chosen a different piece of evidence because you could have done more with it.
Mm.
That's how it relates. Has anybody else got any other ideas on why they would have led to a more abstract answer? Okay, yeah. That's interesting. Anybody else got any other reasons why they might have changed looking back on it? Happy? Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Listening to the experience of others, yes. And that is so important, isn't it? That's part of our reflection. And that's where, we start thinking about our CPD, or about what we've read, which counts as CPD, or conversations we've had with other people that counts as CPD. And I think that's a good giraffe. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, so, there are things that we can look at, and, you can, in respect to the evidence, if you can't think of ways to improve, change what you've done, that's absolutely fine. That's it. You can say, well, maybe you can't, but what if you asked other people? Would they say, actually, we would have preferred it if you'd done this, or we would have learnt more if we'd done that? And that's equally valuable, because even though you didn't, it then helps you to improve again for the future. And you might choose to accept those other people's opinions, or you might reject them. And again, it's part of your evidence, because you might say, oh, well, the students said it would have been much better if they'd been allowed to run riot around the library rather than me putting them in organised groups. And you say, on reflection, that's what the students said they preferred to have done. And you would say, yes, but as a professional librarian, I realised that talking to the teacher, that this would have resulted in chaos and would not have met the learning objectives as a result. So again, that's fine to include it, but explain why you accepted or you rejected it. That's all part of it. And that's good. Yes, giving teachers feedback form, really important, getting that feedback from teachers, from students, from anybody who's been involved in that piece of evidence. We want people to contribute to that, to our reflection. So yes, feedback all the time, having that evidence, really, really important. Just remember though, if you're using email correspondence or anything like that, you do have to keep it anonymous or very vague. So you could say student aged whatever, or student in year 10 or something like that on that. So those are our three main things in practice. It's about putting this stuff down on paper, making sure that, you're not just staring at a blank page. One of the best blank page videos I have ever seen is the Monty Python one called Novel Writing, where they're doing Thomas Hardy coming out in Wessex on a stage platform, and it's being commented on like a football match. And he spends about half an hour trying to get the first word down. He's like, oh, he's gone for the. And it starts, oh no, he's crossed it out. And he started again. And, this is something, if you try and write narratively, you fall into that trap of writing a timeline. And timelines are so difficult to get down onto paper. So one of the things we can do, and that little exercise that we did there, dividing it into those three sections, helps to a certain extent with free writing. Thanks, Bev, for the link to it. But what we can also do is to look at the piece of evidence that we've got. So say we've written it up, we've looked at it, and we want to tweak it, we want to make it better. And we're going to do this through another little exercise by looking at this picture here. So imagine, again, this is like our evidence. We're going to look at this picture, and I want you to put in thoughts, just random thoughts about what you think's happening and why it's happening. Is there anything interesting in this? What's going to happen next? Why are the things that are actually in there? So if you want to either unmute or just put in some comments again into chat about what you think is going on there, or what you've noticed.
Oh, hi there. I'm gonna give a go. So with my second thought, what is happening, I will say that the school librarian is telling them off because they have been misbehaving. You can see that the kids they look quite close. They have some kind of upset looks as well.
Right.
It's just, I'm just being, silly about this. Any interesting features I notice is the look of the kids, and also the fact that they are wearing face masks. So maybe they were in the library just running around without their face masks. They've been called out. What will happen next? I don't know. I leave that for someone else.
Okay, so this is the sort of thing when we're looking at evidence, we're noticing these details. And that's what people say, they look like they're bored. It looks like they're being told about something. Somebody saying they're waiting for their COVID test. Maybe they're not. It's you just, so we know from the masks that it's probably the time of COVID. So we can make, if we had a piece of evidence that was related to a particular time, we can make sure that that's highlighted, that we bring that to the fore so that somebody reading it knows that it was set in a particular time. And, it's maybe they're foreign students about to start a tour, somebody said. We don't know. So we can look for clues. We can look for things in our evidence. Now, if we don't know what's going on, and this is a piece of evidence, how is your assessor going to know what's going on in your evidence unless you make it explicit? So if you start thinking of the evidence like this, and you've got questions, and you're thinking, well, why is that happening? Why is that there? think about your evidence. Oh, what, but, with your evidence, why have I put that in? What's the purpose of that? Does it need to be expressed in that way? Does that make it obvious what point I'm trying to make about this evidence journey to the assessor? So we need to kind of think about this. Somebody said they're not in uniform, so it might be in lockdown, and the librarian's entertaining them. She looks very entertaining, doesn't she? Year 6 on induction. So yeah, lots of ideas about what it could be, but we don't know, do we? We don't know. But in your evidence, when you're writing it up, if you say that, year 6 were invited into an induction session because they, I felt along with senior management that they hadn't really understood the workings of the library or wouldn't be able to access it when they had their formal lessons started because they didn't understand how to get to the resources they needed. So we've got some with laptops and things like that. They've got their social media with them and things like that, maybe. We don't know. But making that kind of thing explicit in your evidence writing is really important. So it's worthwhile always looking at a piece of evidence and unpicking it and thinking about what it's saying to the reader. What are they finding out from it? So I'm going to see how well you've done in terms of my discussion here. And I'd like you to have a little look at this description that somebody wrote for their PKSB section 510 cataloguing and resource description. So yes, have a look at that and then tell me whether you think this part of their evidence would have passed the SLIP test. No, we've got no. Okay, if people would like to unmute or put in chat, not reflective, okay. Where's the why? Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else in there, do you think, that's wrong? Narrative timeline? No use of I, yes. No first person. Third person, yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay, any other thoughts on it? No evaluation of the sources, yeah. No reasoning, yeah. 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 What is better? Yeah. Reflection. Well done. I think you've all done your homework really well. That's good feedback for me. It's looking good. And, the sad thing is that going back to one of those slides I showed right at the very beginning is that how do you think this person would feel if they got rejected? Yeah, sad. Why would they be sad? What is it that's happened there that they think they've done? Yeah, they've put in so much effort, haven't they? Yeah. And this is such a common scenario, because people say, "But I've done it all. I've done it." Yeah, it's been a waste of my time. I spent 2 years gathering all this evidence together, and now nobody appreciates all the hard work I've done. And this is. I just wanted to sort of make it show you, really, which I hope I've done, to show you why this happens and the reason why, sometimes, you can feel really gutted when you get a response from SILIP saying, no, it doesn't meet the criteria. And we just have to be very, very, very careful about it. And I think, it's difficult in schools because we come from such a diverse group of backgrounds. I mean, there may be some people going for chartership who've never been to higher education themselves and therefore, or have been to higher education, but a long, long time ago. And the trouble is that, if you're not used to doing reflective writing, it's really, really difficult to get over just doing the narrative. And I'm hoping that this little session has just helped in terms of doing that for you. So, hoping that we've done these outcomes, that you can understand the skills that are needed a little bit better, thinking of those 3 processes that we need, the putting it in context why you chose it, analysing it while you do it, and then reflecting back on it and what you would do better. And that helps us to turn narrative into reflective writing. And hopefully, by just using those little shape exercises and the picture exercise, we've, covered some techniques that you can fall back on just to say, wait, hang on a minute, let me look at this evidence again and let me, apply those things. So that's all I wanted to say, but if anybody's got any questions, then please feel free to unmute and ask away.
Can I ask you about the very first slide that you showed us when you were showing the objectives of this session? Because I missed one of them. And
let me go back, I think.
Yeah, if you don't mind, please.
So this was the slide I showed at the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is the
okay. Okay. Yeah, the techniques. Thank you. That was it. Thanks a lot.
I stunned everybody into silence.
Sarah, I mean, I've found this all really, really interesting. And I suppose this isn't a question, it's more of a comment, but I found difficulty in doing this as a self-employed person.
Yes, it is. Because I think also you haven't got other people to reflect back on.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you need to find people. I think finding a critical friend, as I say, is always a good idea. Who can kind of look at it with a new eye. Because and I think that when I was saying about using and phones, you can also use that as a conversation with a friend as well, and video it and record it. Because if they start saying to you, well, why did you put that in your evidence? Why did you put that in? And they start using it like the picture I showed you, the random picture of the children, they start asking the questions that maybe you haven't thought of. And I mean, I noticed in chat, there were all sorts of things in there that I hadn't spotted in the photograph. And thought, oh, yeah, that's an interesting angle. And it kind of helps you then think about how you're going to write it up, what you're going to include and what you're going to reject. And that kind of takes you back to one of the reasons why they always say, choose about 12 things for the PKSB, but then you might only write evidence on 6 of them. And part of that is because of this reflective process. During it, you might reject some of them as really not going to be able to deliver the reflective process.
Mm-hmm.
New things in chat. Very good. Yeah, the even better if. Yeah, I think that's a really good phrase to use as well. It would have been even better if I'd done. And you can put that in. That can go in your write-up.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. That was I did tell you it would be an excellent session, and it was. Reflective writing is, I found, one of the hardest things because most of the time we have to write reports, don't we? Everything we do is in report writing in our work. We don't. Teachers are interested what you felt. They want to know what actually happened. So to turn it into reflective is hard. So yes, do ask questions. Like I said, do get in touch. Use the WhatsApp group that we've got for advice and help, and we'll come back to you. And of course, the video will be available for you to watch again and again and again. Every time you think you're wandering off path, watch it again. Watch the relevant bit.